In the heart of Georgia, beneath towering pines that once whispered Confederate secrets to the wind, lies a field where 13,000 Union souls met their final breath. Their only crime? Wearing blue uniforms for Lincoln's sacred cause. Imagine walking through your neighborhood on any ordinary Tuesday morning in America. Every fourth person you pass would have perished here within these 26 acres of red Georgia clay. That's the brutal mathematics of Andersonville, America's deadliest prisoner camp in history. Henry Wirz stands at the gallows, November 10, 1865, facing his final moments on earth. The Swiss immigrant, the only Confederate executed for war crimes, asks one final question echoing through history. Was I truly the monster they claim? You've heard of Auschwitz, of Bergen-Belsen, of Treblinka's systematic horrors during World War II. But few Americans know their own nation's death camp existed a full century earlier, where brothers systematically killed brothers through deliberate neglect, disguised as military necessity. This is the story of Andersonville, where humanity's darkest impulses collided violently with the desperate mathematics of civil war, where ordinary men became monsters, where hope died slowly, one prayer at a time, beneath Georgia's merciless summer sun burning overhead. February 24th, 1864, in the depths of winter, Captain Henry Wirz receives orders to establish a prisoner camp in rural southwestern Georgia. The Swiss immigrant speaks 4 languages fluently, but understands only one dialect perfectly: blind obedience to Confederate authority. Picture 26 acres enclosed by towering 15-foot pine logs, sharpened to deadly points at their tops. No buildings exist anywhere. No shelter stands ready. No latrines function properly. Just red Georgia clay and the terrible promise that more Union prisoners arrive daily. Private Josiah Day of Connecticut steps off the overcrowded cattle car, August 15, 1864, clutching his mother's photograph. The 19-year-old farm boy expects prisoner exchanges within weeks. He will die here in exactly 93 days, calling her name softly. The deadline, a wooden fence marking instant death for any prisoner crossing its sacred boundary without permission. Confederate guards shoot without warning or hesitation. Bodies pile up like cordwood along this border between captivity and eternity, hope and despair, life and death. Water becomes currency more precious than Confederate gold or Union greenbacks in this hellish place. The single creek running through camp carries human waste from 33,000 desperate prisoners. Men drink it anyway, knowing death waits regardless of their choice. Listen carefully to Private Day's diary, written on stolen paper with charcoal from dying fires. Jimmy Morrison died today at dawn, ate his cornbread yesterday morning. God forgive my starving soul. Survival strips away everything you believed about human decency and basic morality. Dr. Joseph Jones arrives to inspect camp conditions for Richmond authorities during the autumn of 1864. The Confederate physician documents systematic murder disguised as imprisonment. His detailed medical reports vanish into bureaucratic void, unread and deliberately ignored by Confederate political leadership. You believe you understand starvation until witnessing it firsthand here in this American hell. Men's eyes sink into skulls like marbles rolling in deep wells. Ribs become xylophone keys beneath parchment skin. Death becomes mercy's sweetest disguise in this place of endless suffering. The raiders emerge from desperation, prisoners preying upon fellow prisoners like hungry wolves in winter. Led by Charles Curtis, They murder fellow captives for bread scraps and copper pennies. Evil thrives when civilization collapses completely into primal survival instincts and base human nature. But heroes rise even in hell's deepest circles, proving human dignity survives systematic destruction. Sergeant Leroy Key organizes the regulators, prisoners policing prisoners with improvised justice. 6 raiders face trial by their own victims. Democracy survives even systematic destruction of human dignity and hope. July 25, 1864, becomes Judgment Day in this unlikely place. The raiders hang from gallows built by fellow prisoners' trembling hands. 30,000 emaciated men watch justice served in humanity's most unlikely courtroom. Hope flickers briefly like candle flame in hurricane winds. Private Day writes his final diary entry with trembling fingers stained by Georgia clay. Mother's beautiful face appears in clouds above this Georgia sky. Tell her I remained her good boy until the very end. He dies holding that rain-dissolved photograph against his heart. Henry Wirz walks among corpses each morning like a farmer inspecting his seasonal crops for harvest. Does he see human faces filled with dreams, or simply numbers for daily reports to Richmond authorities? The human heart remains history's greatest unsolved mystery throughout the ages. Think of your worst day: food poisoning, broken relationships, financial ruin, personal betrayal. Multiply that suffering by 33,000 men, by 451 days of continuous operation. Mathematics cannot capture such concentrated human misery and despair existing in one small place. Providence Spring appears overnight after violent thunderstorms shake Georgia earth to its foundations, fresh water bubbling mysteriously from red clay. Desperate prisoners call it God's miracle sent from heaven. Scientists call it hydrostatic pressure. Faith survives catastrophe through any explanation available to hope. Confederate guards die from identical diseases plaguing Union prisoners behind these wooden walls. Dysentery, scurvy, typhoid fever respect no uniform colors or political allegiances whatsoever. Death proves the ultimate equalizer in this American Holocaust, disguised as military policy and wartime necessity by politicians. Clara Barton searches tirelessly for missing Union soldiers throughout the devastated South after surrender. Her carefully maintained lists contain 13,000 names from Andersonville alone. Some mothers never learn their beloved son's final fate or resting place in Georgia soil forever. April 9, 1865, changes everything across America forever. Lee surrenders at Appomattox Courthouse. News reaches Andersonville slowly, like dawn breaking over vast graveyard. For thousands of Union prisoners, peace arrives too late for earthly redemption or reunion with families. Captain Wirz stands trial in Washington during autumn 1865, facing his accusers. The Swiss immigrant faces charges of conspiracy and murder. His desperate defense echoes through courtroom. I followed orders from Richmond authorities. History judges such excuses harshly, repeatedly, without mercy or understanding. Witness after witness describes systematic cruelty under Wirz's direct command and personal authority. But was he architect or mere instrument of atrocity? The crowded courtroom cannot answer history's most persistent moral questions about individual responsibility versus systemic evil and political necessity during wartime. You want clear villains, obvious heroes in history's complex narrative about good and evil. Reality offers only complicated humans making impossible choices under extraordinary circumstances. Moral clarity becomes luxury during wartime survival when civilization collapses into primal desperation and base human instincts reign supreme. November 10th, 1865, arrives with cold northern winds. Henry Wirz ascends gallows steps while crowds cheer for Confederate blood and justice. The Swiss immigrant's neck snaps at 11:45 precisely. But revenge cannot resurrect 13,000 Union ghosts wandering Georgia soil. Wirz's final words echo across American history, like thunder in mountain valleys. I die innocent of these charges before God Almighty. Was he scapegoat or war criminal? The rope snapped his neck before history provided definitive answers to moral complexity surrounding individual guilt. Consider the mathematics of evil carefully, without emotion clouding judgment. 13,000 deaths divided by 451 operational days equals 29 daily deaths. Can human conscience process such industrial-scale mortality, disguised as military necessity and justified by political authorities claiming patriotic duty? Dorrance Atwater, Union prisoner and camp clerk, smuggled out complete death registers hidden in his clothing during liberation. His extraordinary courage preserved names Richmond wanted erased forever from history. Memory becomes resistance against historical amnesia and official denial of systematic war crimes. After liberation, survivors weigh 70 pounds on average, walking skeletons bearing witness to hell on earth. Created by American hands, justified by Confederate politics, ignored by history until testimonies demanded accountability from those responsible for systematic negligence disguised as military policy and wartime necessity. The cemetery grows beyond imagination. 13,000 headstones arranged in perfect military formation stretching across Georgia landscape. Death finally provides the order, dignity, and respect systematically denied to these men during their final months of suffering under Confederate authority and deliberate neglect. Think of your hometown cemetery, where grandparents rest peacefully beneath familiar oak trees. Double its size, triple it. Fill every grave with men aged 16 to 40. That's Andersonville, America's largest national cemetery, born from systematic negligence and political decisions, prioritizing resources over human life. Martha Stewart, Confederate sympathizer, brings food to dying Union prisoners despite community condemnation and threats. Compassion transcends political boundaries when confronted with human suffering. Mercy survives even systematic cruelty designed to destroy human dignity and break enemy morale through deliberate starvation policies. Private Day's mother receives his personal effects months later through military channels. One photograph, one diary, one uniform button. She frames them together reverently on the mantelpiece. Love makes meaning from meaningless loss, hope from despair, memory from devastating grief that never truly heals. War Department investigators document evidence systematically, with emerging photography technology capturing truth. Images capture skeletal survivors, mass graves, primitive conditions. Visual testimony condemns Confederate prison policies forever through undeniable historical record, preserving truth for future generations, seeking to understand systematic cruelty disguised as military necessity. But northern prisons killed Confederate soldiers too. Elmira, Point Lookout, Rock Island witnessed identical horrors and systematic neglect. Death knew no geographic boundaries during America's Civil War. Cruelty wore blue uniforms and gray ones with equal effectiveness in destroying human life through deliberate policy. Dr. Jones's medical reports reveal Confederate authorities knew Andersonville conditions were fatal to human life. They continued operations anyway for political reasons. Bureaucratic murder disguised as military necessity justified systematic genocide through deliberate starvation policies designed to break Union morale completely. Survivors carry psychological scars forever etched in memory like brands on cattle. They wake screaming decades later, haunted by visions of starvation, disease, death. War's cruelest casualties survive to tell stories nobody wants hearing about America's capacity for systematic evil disguised as patriotic duty. You walk through modern Andersonville historic site on a peaceful Sunday afternoon. Tourists photograph monuments, read historical markers, buy postcards. Can sanitized memory capture reality of systematic human destruction designed to break Union morale through deliberate starvation policies implemented by Confederate authorities claiming military necessity? The spring still flows eternally. Providence Spring, named by desperate prisoners who saw God's hand in clean water. Faith and hydrostatic pressure coexist peacefully in human interpretation of survival against impossible odds. Nature provides while humanity destroys through systematic evil disguised as political necessity and military strategy. Henry Wirz becomes martyr to some Southerners, monster to Northern veterans seeking justice. History's moral judgments shift with political winds and generational changes, but 13,000 graves remain permanent testimony to truth. Physical evidence survives political interpretation and historical revisionism attempting to minimize systematic cruelty. Consider moral complexity honestly, without political bias, clouding judgment about individual responsibility. Wirz requested supplies Richmond couldn't provide during wartime. He followed orders during desperate circumstances. Does context excuse or explain systematic negligence resulting in mass death of prisoners under his command and authority? Private Day's diary entries reveal gradual dehumanization. Friendship becomes competition. Compassion becomes liability. Survival becomes everything sacred. War strips away civilization's thin veneer, exposing human nature's darkest possibilities lurking beneath respectability. Moral boundaries dissolve when starvation becomes daily reality and death stalks constantly. The raiders represented capitalism's darkest impulse, exploiting scarcity for personal gain while fellow humans died around them. Economic systems reveal human character under extreme stress when normal social constraints disappear completely. Greed survives when compassion dies. Profit motives override human decency and basic moral responsibility. But the regulators proved democracy survives even in hell's deepest circles of human suffering. Prisoners organized courts, conducted trials, executed justice. Self-governance emerges from chaos when leadership takes moral responsibility despite impossible circumstances. Human dignity survives systematic attempts to destroy it through deliberate policy and neglect. Clara Barton's Missing Soldiers Bureau processed 41,000 desperate inquiries from families seeking lost sons. Each number represents family anguish, mothers' sleepless nights, nation's incomplete healing from self-inflicted wounds of civil war. Grief becomes permanent feature of American landscape after systematic destruction of human life. Think about accountability in warfare and individual responsibility for systematic evil. Richmond officials escaped prosecution entirely. Northern prison commanders faced no trials. Only Henry Wirz paid ultimate price for America's systematic prisoner abuse during Civil War. Justice becomes selective when applied to political enemies. Andersonville survivors testified at Wirz's trial with devastating detail about systematic cruelty and deliberate neglect. Their words paint pictures of deliberate cruelty disguised as military necessity. Truth emerges despite official attempts at historical whitewashing and political manipulation designed to minimize responsibility for war crimes. Death rate peaked during summer 1864. 100 daily deaths from disease, starvation, despair. Georgia heat accelerated decomposition of hope, humanity, and human bodies in this American hell on earth. Climate became accomplice to systematic murder through deliberate neglect disguised as military necessity. You want to believe such systematic cruelty belongs to distant history, irrelevant to modern times. But dehumanization repeats whenever ordinary people abandon moral responsibility to higher authorities claiming patriotic necessity over human decency. Evil requires only good people doing nothing when confronted with systematic injustice. Private Day's photograph shows young face filled with hope, dreams, patriotic fervor for Union cause and Lincoln's vision. Compare it to descriptions of his corpse. Skeletal, diseased, abandoned like forgotten livestock. War devours youth systematically, transforming dreams into nightmares, hope into despair, life into death. Dorrance Atwater's smuggled death register becomes historical evidence proving systematic murder disguised as military policy during wartime. His courage transforms personal survival into collective memory, individual testimony into national conscience formation. Truth survives through one man's extraordinary moral courage when others remained silent about systematic evil. The graves speak silently across centuries. 13,000 stories interrupted by politics, neglect, systematic cruelty disguised as military policy and wartime necessity. Each weathered headstone represents abandoned dreams, interrupted love, permanent loss to families. Death becomes democracy when all receive equal treatment in final resting place. Henry Wirz's execution satisfied Northern demands for Confederate blood and justice after years of systematic suffering. But did killing one Swiss immigrant heal America's self-inflicted wounds? Revenge masquerades as justice throughout human history, consistently, providing emotional satisfaction, but no true healing from systematic evil and political decisions. Consider what you would do honestly when faced with impossible moral choices. Faced with impossible orders, limited supplies, desperate circumstances, would you resist authority or follow commands? Moral courage costs everything during wartime when survival becomes paramount and civilization collapses into primal instincts ruling human behavior. The spring flows eternally through red Georgia clay, Providence Spring, carrying fresh water through this landscape of death. Nature provides while humans systematically destroy. Creation persists despite humanity's capacity for evil disguised as patriotic duty. Life continues when human systems fail completely, offering hope. Survivors built monuments, wrote memoirs, formed veterans organizations to preserve memory against deliberate historical forgetting. Testimony becomes resistance against historical amnesia, evidence against official denials of systematic war crimes. Memory preserves truth when political authorities attempt to rewrite history for convenient narratives. But memory fades inevitably with time's passage. Witnesses die naturally. Official records get buried in archives. Only physical evidence remains permanent. Graves, photographs, archaeological remnants. History requires active preservation efforts against deliberate forgetting and political manipulation designed to minimize responsibility for systematic evil. You stand where 13,000 died systematically through deliberate neglect disguised as military necessity. Georgia earth holds their bones, their stories, their interrupted dreams forever. Sacred ground created by human cruelty, preserved by national conscience seeking redemption from systematic evil committed in democracy's name. Today, Andersonville National Historic Site welcomes visitors seeking understanding about America's darkest chapter in Civil War history. Park rangers explain the complexities of Civil War prisoner policy. Education replaces rage. Knowledge substitutes for revenge. Understanding becomes pathway to preventing future systematic evil disguised as patriotic necessity. But some lessons transcend historical education about past events and their contemporary relevance. When ordinary people abandon moral responsibility to higher authorities, systematic evil becomes possible. Andersonville proves this universal human truth repeatedly throughout history. Individual choices matter when confronting systematic injustice disguised as political necessity. Private Day's diary survived when he didn't, preserved by fellow prisoners' extraordinary courage against impossible odds. His words testify across centuries about humanity's capacity for both cruelty and dignity. Literature becomes immortality for interrupted lives, truth surviving political manipulation and historical revisionism. The cemetery remains perfectly maintained by National Park Service. 13,000 graves in military formation, stretching endlessly across Georgia landscape. Death finally provided order, dignity, and respect, systematically denied during their final months of suffering. Equality achieved only in death when denied in life. Walk away remembering this essential truth about human nature and moral responsibility. Evil triumphs when good people follow bad orders without question. Andersonville happened because ordinary humans abandoned extraordinary moral courage when it mattered most. Choose differently when your moment arrives inevitably.